So this is a really interesting tool that endurance athletes, strength athletes, I think can all benefit from. In fact, athletes and people of all kinds, even if you're not an athlete, even if you're not exercising at all, there's a good question of whether or not your system as a whole is doing okay or not. We rely on the thermometer. Do we have a fever or not? We rely on subjective things. Do I feel good or not? Am I digesting well or not? Those are all subjective. The carbon dioxide tolerance test it's objective in that it measures your capacity to engage the so-called parasympathetic arm of your nervous system, which is the calming aspect of your nervous system, and it measures your ability to consciously control a particular skeletal muscle, which is your diaphragm. So here's how you do the carbon dioxide tolerance test. You wake up in the morning. If you have to use the restroom first, do that. But try and stay away from your phone. If you have your phone, put it on airplane mode, go to the timer, or use a hand watch or some other way of measuring time. Stay off social media for just a few seconds. It'll be okay. And what you're going to do is you're going to inhale through your nose as deeply as you can. You can do this lying down, sitting, whatever. Inhale through your nose and then exhale all the way. So that's one. You're going to repeat that 4 times, okay? So inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale 4 times. And ideally, you're inhaling through the nose and you're exhaling through the mouth. That's just the beginning of this carbon dioxide tolerance test. Then you take a 5th inhale as deep as you can through your nose. Fill your lungs as much as you can. And if you can try and expand make your stomach go out while you do that, that means that your diaphragm is really engaged. So you're inhaling as much as you possibly can. Then hit the timer, and your goal is to release that air as slowly as possible through your mouth. So it looks like you have a tiny, tiny little straw in your mouth and you're letting it go. As slowly as you possibly can. Measure what we call the carbon dioxide blow-off time or discard rate. I know you can all sit with lungs empty after you eliminate all that air, but don't lie to yourself. Don't stop the timer when you've been sitting with your lungs empty for a while. Stop the timer when you are finally no longer able to exhale any more air. Okay, so you do inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale slowly. I just said it quickly for sake of time. Then you do this 5th big inhale through your mouth. And I'm not going to do it for the full duration. And then you're measuring that time. Your carbon dioxide discard rate will be somewhere between 1 second and presumably 2 minutes. 2 minutes would be a heroic carbon dioxide discard time. 30 seconds would be more typical. 20 seconds would be fast. If your carbon dioxide discard time is 20 or 25 seconds or less, you are not necessarily recovered from your previous day's activities. Okay? There's ways to push through this, but hold on to that thought for a moment. If your carbon dioxide discard time is somewhere between about 30 seconds and 60 seconds, you are in what we would call kind of the green zone, where you are in a position to do more physical work. And if your carbon dioxide discard time is somewhere between 65 and 120 seconds, well then you have almost certainly recovered your nervous system. I'm not talking about the individual muscles, but your nervous system is prepared to do more work. And Andy's lab has great data on this as it relates to exercise physiology. I think that story should be out in the not too distant future. My lab has been using carbon dioxide discard time to look at anxiety and recovery from bouts of anxiety. So 2 totally independent projects, but using the same measure. So you've got HRV, which requires some technology usually. You've got grip strength, which you can assess subjectively, or you can use a floor scale. And now you have carbon dioxide tolerance. You want to do this in the morning when you wake up. And keep track. Just write down in a little book, or maybe just keep track in your mind of your carbon dioxide discard time. If you find that your discard times are dropping, even if they're in the 40-second range or 50-second range, but normally you can do 75 seconds or 120 seconds, if they're starting to drop by anywhere from 15 to 20%, you're veering in the direction of not recovering. And I I'm really keen on this tool because everybody has different recovery abilities. Some people are eating really well and sleeping really well. Some people have minimal stress or can buffer stress really well. Other people, they dissolve into a puddle of tears if they read one, text message that's troubling, or whatever, and I realize, and I say that with sympathy, I realize people have varying levels of stress and demand in their life. It's just impossible to prescribe an entire protocol that says, okay, yes, you should train today, and this is exactly what you should do. No, you shouldn't. Use carbon dioxide discard rate because A, it's valuable, it's informative, B, it's zero cost, and C, it's something you can track objectively over time. And that's really the key. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that what carbon dioxide discard rate is tapping into is your ability to mechanically control your diaphragm. Certainly that's one aspect of it. But that relates in a very direct way to your ability to put the brake on your stress system, to engage the so-called parasympathetic or calming arm of your autonomic nervous system. And another thing that Andy Galpin's group is testing is at the offset of training, after your run, after your weight training session, maybe even after your plyometrics session. We didn't really talk about jumping and throwing and that sort of thing. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode. But they and other groups, including some elite athletes and other groups that are very interested in physical performance, are using a tool where they deliberately disengage for 5 minutes at the end of training. They deliberately engage this calming or parasympathetic arm of the nervous system. And you can do that through any number of different tools. I'm a big fan of respiration tools because they're always available to you. Your breathing is always there. I talk about some of these tools in previous episodes, but you could use things like non-sleep deep rest and SDR at the end of a training session. You could do 10 physiological size double inhales through the nose, followed by long exhales. That will definitely engage the parasympathetic nervous system at the end of training. So rather than finish your training session and then just hop onto your phone, serious athletes and people who are serious about recovery initiate that recovery at the very end of their training, and they start to kickstart that recovery process and they measure CO2 tolerance in the morning. So there's several groups that are doing that. In fact, I know several groups, because I'm working with them, that are using physiological size between sets in order to recover their nervous system and maintain nerve to muscle contractibility, maintain focus throughout their training session, enhance their focus by doing a few physiological size, so double inhale, exhale in between sets. So they're getting very focused and very intense about their strength work or explosiveness work or muscle isolation work during their sets, and then in between sets, they're deliberately disengaging the nervous system and then they're re-engaging it again. So I just wanted to emphasize that. So recovery is a complex process. It's got a lot of things, but the CO2 tolerance test should be a valuable tool. Now, another tool for recovery that people are very excited about is the use of cold and the ice bath. And this is important if you are somebody who uses cold through cold shower or ice bath or jumping in a lake or a river, whatever it is that you use to generate cold as a recovery tool. You should be aware that there are data starting to emerge that if your goal is recovery or strength improvements, using cold within the 4 hours following a workout, I'm not talking about palmar cooling, I'm talking about whole body cooling or cooling from the neck down. Yes, it will reduce inflammation. Yes, it will reduce the amount of delayed onset muscle soreness. One readout of how intense or damaging a given workout was, not the only readout. But it does seem to interfere with some of the things like mTOR pathways, the mammalian target rapamycin pathway, and other pathways related to inflammation that promote muscle repair. Remember, and muscle growth. Remember, stress, tension, and damage are the stimulus for nerve to muscle connections to change and for muscles to get bigger, stronger, and better. And so if you're getting into the ice bath after training or taking a really cold shower after doing resistance training, you are likely short-circuiting the improvements that you're trying to create. Now, athletes who are trying to recover quickly so that they can get back into more training sessions, or let's say you're somebody who doesn't really want to gain much strength or hypertrophy, and you're mainly focused on endurance and you want to do more endurance work and you've been weight training, well then exposing yourself to cold can be beneficial, but you're not going to get as great of benefits from the resistance training. In other words, cold after resistance training seems to short circuit some of the benefits of that resistance training. There are some other things that can short circuit the benefits of resistance training as well. One of those is antihistamines. Some interesting data were published recently, I believe it was in Scientific Reports, yes, that showed that antihistamines can prevent some of the benefits of cardiovascular exercise, of endurance type work, so running, swimming, fairly long duration, or even sprint type work, as well as inhibit some of the processes associated with resistance training. Remember, resistance training or endurance training, that's a stimulus for stress, and the adaptation to that stress is how you get better, that you can run further, faster, lift more weight, hypertrophy the muscle, etc. So antihistamines can be a problem. Obviously, don't compromise your ability to breathe completely, but antihistamines generally work by blocking what are called mast cells, M-A-S-T. Mast cells are really interesting cells that we'll talk about in our month on neuroimmune function. They travel in the bloodstream, and they're these little packets that burst open at sites of inflammation. Muscle damage and inflammation is a signal that something needs to change. And so taking antihistamines, it appears, can disrupt some of that inflammatory process. So you actually want inflammation during and immediately after a workout, then you want to bring inflammation down later, and I'll mention how to do that. The other thing are non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs. You know their trade names. These are painkillers that many people take. Those, as I've mentioned in a previous episode, can interfere with the benefits of endurance training and the benefits of resistance training. In addition to that, they block pain signals, and pain is a very good signal that you might be doing something wrong. And so while nobody likes to be in pain, I suppose there are probably a few people out there like to be in pain, but that's a different story, but nobody likes to be in pain, the non-steroid anti-inflammatories, the NSAIDs as they're called, and the antihistamines seem to prevent a lot of the gains, the improvements in endurance, strength, and size that people are specifically using exercise for. So be cautious about your use of non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, especially within the 4 hours preceding or the 4 hours following exercise.